7. Government property. Neil Ernst was a doctor of a different breed. It would have gone completely against his grain to apply two different standards of care to his patients. A higher one for the Americans, a lower one for the Hmong. But might Lia Lee have been better off if her family had brought her to Roger Fife? Might Neil actually have compromised Lia's health by being so uncompromising? That latter question still bothers him. For example, if Lia's prescriptions hadn't been changed so often, her parents might have been more likely to give her medications, since they would have been less confused and more confident that the doctors knew what they were doing. Neil was pretty sure, however, that because Lia's condition was progressive and unpredictable, he could treat it best by constantly fine-tuning her drug regimen. If he had chosen a single pretty good anticonvulsant and stuck with it, he would have had to decide that Lia wasn't going to get the same care. He would have given the daughter of a middle-class American family who would have been willing and able to comply with a complex course of treatment, which would have been more discriminatory, to deprive Lia of the optimal care that another child would have received, or to fail to tailor her treatment in such a way that her family would be most likely to comply with it. A decade ago, that is not the way Neil looked at the situation. He never seriously considered lowering his standard of care. His job, as he saw it, was to practice good medicine. The Lee's job was to comply. Lack of compliance constituted child endangerment, which is a form of child abuse. He postponed calling Child Protective Services for as long as he could, giving Lia's parents every possible chance to reform, talking the case over with his wife nearly every night, worrying that what happened in Fresno might happen in Merced. He and Peggy had both heard and believed the rumor about the Hmong father in Fresno who hanged himself in his prison cell after being unjustly arrested for child abuse. Neil finally decided that he had no choice but to request that Lia be placed in foster care. Other options he has considered in retrospect, such as arranging for a nurse to visit the Lee house 3 times every day to give Lia her medicine, or enlisting the help of Hmong community leaders to increase parental compliance. Either seemed at the time to have insuperable bureaucratic obstacles or simply didn't occur to him. When I asked Neil whether, once he had made up his mind, he continued to brood about the effect his decision would have on the Lee family, he said, "Yeah, sure. I mean, you always do, but you get so single-minded about the child's welfare that you can pretty effectively suppress any kind of bad feelings you have about what you do to the parents." And there was another part, and here I am speaking for myself, not for Peggy, which is that I felt that there was a lesson that needed to be learned. I don't know if this is a bigoted statement, but I am going to say it anyway. I felt it was important for these Hmongs to understand that there were certain elements of medicine that we understood better than they did, and that there were certain rules they had to follow with their kids' lives. I wanted the word to get out in the community that if they deviated from that, it was not acceptable behavior. Once he had determined that Lia's parents were endangering her health, it was fully within Neil's legal rights to file a report with Child Protective Services. In fact, he might have committed a crime if he hadn't filed a report. Failure to report child abuse is a prosecutable offense in 44 states, including California, because physicians, along with other healthcare workers, teachers, daycare employees, and police officers, are especially likely to come across evidence of abuse. All 50 states have immunity clauses in their child welfare laws that protect these groups from civil or criminal charges after they file abuse reports, even if they are found to be wrong. The fact that Lia's parents refused to give her the medications, at least in part because of cultural or religious reasons, of which Neil was only hazily aware, would probably have cut little ice in court, even if the Lees had been savvy enough to try to defend their actions. If a child had not been involved, things would have been different. In cases involving competent adults, the principle of autonomy almost always takes legal precedence over the principle of beneficence, which means, for example, that a Jehovah's Witness has a right to refuse a blood transfusion, or a Christian Scientist a course of chemotherapy, even if he or she dies as a result. But with a minor, the state has the right, indeed, the obligation, to force the patient to comply with a life-saving treatment. Even if it is forbidden by the family's religion, parents may be free to become martyrs themselves, wrote Justice Robert Jackson in a 1943 Supreme Court decision, but it does not follow that they are free, in identical circumstances, to make martyrs of their children. Several parents who belong to fundamentalist sects have been jailed after the deaths of children, whom they had attempted to cure with faith healing. No Christian Scientist has yet been imprisoned, though several have been convicted of involuntary manslaughter or child endangerment and sentenced to a combination of fines, probation, and community service. Asterisk if parents who practice these relatively mainstream religions have so consistently failed to sway the courts, it is doubtful that a judge would have been favorably impressed had the Lees informed him that they were shamanistic animists, who believed their daughter's illness was caused by the loss of her soul and could be treated most effectively by animal sacrifice. Neil never had any desire to have Leah's parents prosecuted, and no legal action was ever taken against them. All he wanted was to get Lia out of their hands and into the stewardship of someone who would administer her medications exactly as he prescribed them. On May 2, 1985, she was placed temporarily in a foster home run by two Mennonite sisters who, whenever she became hyperactive, strapped her into an infant car seat on the living room floor. After 2 weeks, she was returned home and her parents were given one last chance. Blood tests continued to show that they were giving her less than the prescribed dose of Tegretol. At this point, the Merced Department of Child Protective Services filed petition number 15270 with the Superior Court of the State of California in the matter of Lia Lee, a person coming within the provisions of the juvenile court law. The petition began. Your petitioner is informed, believes and therefore alleges 1. That the above-named minor resides at 37 East 12th Street, Apt. A. Merced, California. 2. That said minor is 2 years 11 months of age, having been born on the 19th day of July, 1982. 3. That said minor comes within the provisions of Section 300 Subdivision A of the Juvenile Court Law of the State of California. As follows. Said minor is in need of proper and effective parental care and has no parent willing to or capable of exercising such care and control. Said minor is an epileptic with a complex seizure disorder, and the parents are administering subtherapeutic medication levels. As a result of the parents' failure to comply with medication instructions, said minor has had multiple hospitalizations and severe seizures which have been life-threatening. The doctor states that said minor needs to be removed from the parental home at this time to preserve the life of said minor. There is a substantial danger to the physical health of said minor and there are no reasonable means by which said minor's physical health can be protected without removing the minor from her parents' physical custody. It concluded. Wherefore, your petitioner prays that this court declare said minor to be a dependent child of the juvenile court. On June 26, Lia was removed from her home again, this time for a placement of at least 6 months. Her parents were not notified in advance that she was going to be taken. When the CPS workers arrived, Phua was out of the house, visiting relatives. Several years later, now qaug told me, through an interpreter, what had happened. He was under the impression that the social workers, who were accompanied by a Hmong interpreter named Su Xiong, were police officers. The police came to take Lia away. Su told the doctor that we didn't give Lia any medicine. And that is why the doctors got mad and they came to take Lia away. I was very angry. I almost killed the translator. I said, this is my child and I love her. The police said for 6 months Lia is government property. Phua told me. When I came home my husband told me that they took the baby and he said that they didn't tell them where they took the baby. I didn't know any English so I didn't know what to think or what to say. I told my elder relatives. But they said, well, if those people came to take her, then you can't do anything. I cried so much that I thought my eyes would go blind. It was interesting to me that almost none of the MCMC residents, even those who had taken care of Lia many times in the emergency room and, years later, could recall the medical aspects of her case in minute detail, were aware, until I told them, that Neil had arranged to have Lia removed from her family. When they heard about it, every one of them disagreed with his decision, though none of them could suggest a better alternative. Neil had not deliberately concealed what had happened. It was simply not his habit to discuss emotionally charged topics, especially ones about which he felt apprehensive or ambivalent, with anyone but his wife. When I told Dan Murphy about Lia's placement in foster care, he was astounded. Neil must have been just desperate to do something like that. He said, that's the first time I've ever heard of a child being taken away from good caretakers. You know, It's usually somebody who is willfully harming their child, either through extreme neglect or through actually doing them damage. But Lia's parents really loved their kid. If I was in another country and somebody took my kid for reasons that I couldn't understand, I would at least start considering violent alternatives. I really would. In Merced's Hmong community, especially among the Lee and Yang clans, everyone knew about what had happened. The news of Lia's disappearance confirmed what many people had already suspected, that doctors were not to be trusted and that they were in league with other coercive authorities, a lesson of sorts. But not the one Neil had in mind. Long after the event, I asked Lia Lee and qaug, two Hmong interpreters who worked for the Public Health Department, what they had thought of the matter. Lia is a woman and qaug a man. They both remembered it well. Maybe they should not take Lia away, said Lia diplomatically. Maybe this was not right. The parents not want to hurt the child. They try very hard to be good parents. They lost many child in Laos and they love this child very very much. In Laos, the parent have 100% responsibility over the child. How can you say you can take it away unless it is orphan? Qaug said more sharply. It was not necessary for CPS to take the kid. If they don't care about the kid, okay, but parents love the kid more than others in the house. The mother was crying and crying all the time. The father, he was not crying. He was very angry. Hmong men do not cry even if you feel sad. In Laos, I never heard of this happening in my life. In a master's thesis in anthropology called Analysis of Cultural Beliefs and Power Dynamics in Disagreements About Healthcare of Hmong Children, a Minnesota physician named Kathleen and qaug summarized the Hmong attitude toward responsibility in pediatric medical cases. Hmong parents believe parents are responsible for the child's welfare and for deciding the child's medical treatment, since parents gave birth to the child, provide for the child's physical needs, and love the child. They are the ones who decide the treatment approach for the child. Because family members love the child and are part of the family, they can assist the parents in making decisions about the optimal actions. Respected family lineage leaders also assist parents in making difficult decisions about serious conditions. But as physicians are not family members, they cannot make decisions for the child. If doctors take over the parent's responsibility and decide to treat without parental permission, then doctors are responsible for the consequences. If the child dies, it is their fault. And how will they repay the parents? Indeed, how will they pay for the life? As long as doctors and parents continue to negotiate, even if they disagree, the conflict is confined to differences in belief systems. Once the police are called and court orders are obtained, however, the difficulties escalate to another level, wrote qaug. The differences are no longer about beliefs. The differences are about power. Doctors have power to call the police and to access state power which Hmong parents do not have. Because the Hmong have historically been so resistant to authority, they are especially confused and enraged when they are stripped of their power in a country to which they have fled, because of its reputation for freedom. As one parent, whose sick child was forced to have a spinal tap after the doctor obtained a court order, told qaug, the way we feel, the United States is more communist than our country is. Another angry parent who had had a similar experience told her, no matter how much we don't know about technology, about human health, physical, but we have seen a lot and experience too. I don't want any doctor to treat any human being like an animal. Animals, they don't understand. But human beings do. We do know how to talk. We do understand like anyone who is a human being. We are just refugees, but we are human beings like any doctor too. Once a child is removed from parental custody, Child Protective Services must file an explanatory petition within 2 days, and a detention hearing is usually scheduled for the day after the petition is filed. Now qaug Lee appeared in court on June 28, 1985, accompanied by a public defender. No one remembers whether an interpreter was there as well. The judge approved CPS's petition to detain Lia. Now qaug, who was unaware that it was permissible to object, is recorded as assenting. The plan detailed in the disposition of case number 15270 called for Lia to remain in foster care for 6 months. The minimum time that Neil estimated would be needed to stabilize her seizure disorder. Her parents would be permitted weekly visits, though these did not start until she had been away from home for more than a month. In fact, following a policy common at the time, that was intended to prevent distraught parents from immediately retrieving their children. CPS did not inform Phu and now qaug of their daughter's whereabouts for several weeks. According to now qaug, after 1 month, I went to my cousin who speaks English and asked him to call the police and ask where Lia is because my wife was missing. Lia too much and she was going crazy. Lia was to be reunited with her family after 6 months only if the court was persuaded that her parents would comply with her medication regimen. Child Protective Services was to work with them to increase that likelihood. If the court did not decide within a year that Lia could safely return to her family, the Lees would permanently lose custody. It was the responsibility of CPS to find Lia an appropriate foster home. Her caseworker filled out a Form 4, specialized foster care, that is, care for a child with unusual medical or behavioral problems. Among the behavior problems of child that she circled were, has had 1 or more violent episodes, causing minor physical injury within the last year, has caused minor property damage on 6 or more occasions within the past year, displays self-injurious behavior, biting, scratching, at least once a month, becomes aggressive or hostile when frustrated, does not participate in social activities, does not participate in group projects, is hyperactive in all environments, is resistive in all situations, has temper tantrums daily. The caseworker was to add up the points and rank the cumulative severity of the problem behavior on a scale from 40, the best, to 70, the worst. At 81, Lia's score was off the scale, the only categories in which she received favorable, indeed, perfect, scores were no evidence of depressive behavior, responds to affection appropriately, and gives affection appropriately. A day or two before Lia was removed from her home, Dee and Tom Corda, a couple living 25 miles northwest of Merced who had recently been certified as foster parents, received a call from CPS. "We've got a 2-year-old Hmong girl with epilepsy," said the social worker. "Can you handle it?" At the time, Dee Corda had never heard the word Hmong, had 4 children of her own, was pregnant with her 5th, and was taking care of another foster child. Her first. "Sure," she said. Dee told me several years later, "I was so eager I would have taken anything they offered." I was curious to meet the Cordas, because when I called Dee, the first thing she had said was, "How are Phu and now qaug? Don't you just love them?" Since at that point I had never heard an American say a good word about the Lees, and since I subscribed to the conventional wisdom that biological parents and foster parents are natural enemies, her question threw me somewhat off balance. When I arrived at the Cordas rambling 1-story house, which was in a dairy community dotted with peach and almond orchards, I was greeted by several large dogs that Dee and Tom, with the help of the 5 biological and 6 foster children, most of them retarded or emotionally disturbed, who were living with them at the time, were raising as canine guides for the blind. As we sat in the living room, Dee simultaneously showed me a small scrapbook full of pictures of Lia. She keeps one for every child she has cared for, and dispensed hugs to children of various sizes and races who wandered in and out. After Lia arrived in the Corda house, she cried continuously. For 10 days. Lia was the only child I've ever heard who could cry while inhaling and exhaling, said Dee. In and out, loud and abrasive, on and on and on. I know she was crying for them, for her mom and dad. Even though she didn't know the words to tell me, I'd find her curled in the bathtub, her face real worried and troubled and confused and sad. Sometimes she would pound at the door like a caged animal and shout, "Nah, nah, nah, nah." Now I know. That means daddy in Hmong. In fact, Lia was probably saying Nyam, pronounced Naya, which means mother. The word for father is tsiv. Because the Cordas spoke no Hmong, they had no way of comforting Lia verbally. The only thing that seemed to help was constant physical contact. During the day, Dee simultaneously carried Lia in a backpack and her own youngest child, who was 9 months old when Lia arrived, in a front pack. At night, Lia usually slept in the Cordas bed, which was 10.5 feet wide, large enough to accommodate a substantial fraction of the household. When Lia was inconsolable, Dee, guessing correctly that she had never been weaned, breastfed her alongside her own baby. If there was ever going to be a way, it was Lia's way. She told me, that's what she was used to. Her family let her rule the roost at home because she was the special child. The princess. Oh, Lia could be ornery and strong-willed, but she was a sweetie too. She'd crawl on your lap. She was so beautiful. We didn't mean nothing to her at first, but she learned to love us. She knew how to love and how to let people love her. We were blessed to have Lia. Janine Hilt, the CPS caseworker, frequently visited the Cordis during this period and kept a welfare services contact record that gives some idea of what the Cordis less blessed days with Lia were like. Some of the entries. Lia's problems are very behavioral. Cries constantly. Real disruptive. Real anger. Will cry nonstop 2 to 5 a.m. Kicking. Won't give in. Family is on edge. Tantruming. Withholds food. Looks at D. Takes off her panties and pees. Pooping on floor now. Bit herself on lip. Lia crying 4 days straight. Smearing feces. Intense crying again. Stripped herself. Peed on the floor. Went on a wave of destruction. Had to sedate her. Noting that Lia had inflicted numerous injuries on other children ranging from bruises to cuts requiring stitches, that she required constant supervision to keep her from activities that she has previously experienced as harmful or dangerous, i.e., hot water, bathtubs, high places, swimming pool, etc., and that the Cordis were providing an extremely high level of care. Janine Hilt successfully petitioned the Department of Human Resources to pay Dee and Tom the unusually high fee of $1,000 a month for taking care of Lia. The Lees had supported themselves and the 7 of their 9 surviving children who were living at home, including Lia, on $790 a month in welfare payments plus $84 that Lia, whose epilepsy had qualified her for disability funding, received as supplemental security income. In her letter to the Department of Human Resources, Janine Hilt also noted that Dee Corda was taking Lia to between 2 and 5 doctor's appointments a week, despite the fact that Dee followed the anticonvulsant prescriptions to the letter, a task that sometimes required holding Lia down and repeating the doses after she spat them all over Dee's clothes. Lia was still seizing. In fact, she seized more frequently at the Cordis than she had when she was living with her own family. She was hospitalized 4 times at Emmanuel Medical Center in Turlock, the town nearest the Cordis home, and on one occasion was transferred from Emmanuel to MCMC, which did not make a favorable impression on Dee. The MCMC nurses wouldn't talk to her nice and soft. She told me, when she soiled her bed, it wasn't oh honey, it was my God what a mess. They'd tie both arms and both legs with cloth, like nursing homes use on old people. It was degrading. Lia's new doctors in Turlock changed her prescription several times, eliminating first the phenobarbital and then the tegretol and substituting various cominat, ions of dilantin, depakine, and Ritalin. According to Dee, the new regimens had fewer side effects. Tegretol and phenobarbital were the worst combination for Lia. She said, the worst. When she took them she was drunk. She couldn't navigate or walk. I think that's why her parents wouldn't give them to her. Then she'd have a seizure and everyone would get mad at them. Lia's coordination improved, but her seizures continued. After they found out where their daughter had been taken, Lia's family visited her whenever their nephew, who owned a car, could give them a ride. The first time they visited, Dee showed them how she carried Lia on her back, just the way Fu did, and how Lia slept in the family bed. The Corda children lent the Lee children bathing suits, and they all swam together in the backyard pool. Pang crawled on the lawn with Dee's baby. Eventually, the Lee's 12-year-old daughter May became friends with the Corda's 10-year-old daughter Wendy, and once spent a whole week at their house. Fu embroidered Anaya's among baby carrier for Dee. After a few months went by, Dee started leaving her own baby with Fu when she took Lia to medical appointments. Perhaps the first instance in the history of Child Protective Services that a foster mother has asked a legally abusive parent to babysit for her. It did not take the Cordis long to decide that CPS had made a mistake in taking Lia away from her family, though CPS, when Dee told them so, did not agree. I was attached to Lia, but she really needed to be at home, said Dee. Fu and now qaug were so warm, so caring, and they loved that child so much. I'm bitter. They never should have been in the system. By the time I met Dee, she had taken care of a total of 35 foster children. most of whom had been severely battered or sexually abused by their parents. Lia was the only one for whom she had ever recommended reunification. At the end of each of the Lees' visits to the Cordes house, Lia tried to get in the car with them and screamed with panic when they drove away without her. Now qaug told me, the family really took care of Lia and really cared for her too. But maybe she missed us too much and that is why she got sicker. We missed her too. I do not know how to describe how we missed her, Phua said. Our bed was empty without her. I loved her a lot and I had always held her during the night and didn't let her sleep by herself. I cried every night when I got in the bed and she was not there. 2 months after Lia had been taken from her family, now qaug told the caseworker that he wanted to commit suicide if Lia did not come home. 4 months after that, now qaug came home to find Phug pointing a knife at herself. He took the knife away. A month later, Janine Hilt's case log noted that Phua was hysterical and threatening suicide again. Child Protective Services considered placing the entire family in a psychiatric hospital, but decided against it. Lia did not return home after 6 months, as the Lees had expected her to. On December 18, 1985, at the 6-month reunification hearing, the court ruled that Phua and now qaug had failed to demonstrate their ability to comply with their daughter's medical regimen. First, they had refused to sign a social services plan that had been presented to them in August, which stated, among other things, that in order for reunification eventually to take place, the Lees must agree to make and meet medical appointments for our child, including appointments for routine care and illness, and learn how to properly administer her medication. A CPS worker wrote on the plan, their feeling is that Lia should be returned to their care at once. Consequently, they declined to sign the agreement. Second, when Lia had been permitted a week-long home visit in September as a test of her parents' compliance, they had failed miserably. The CPS petition against reunification noted. The parents were again instructed, via interpreter, on the proper method of administering the medications. Color-coded graphics were also utilized to reinforce the instructions. The parents stated they understood and indicated that they would follow through immediately. During this visit, the parents were allowed to have the minor treated by a shaman, Sikh, from the Hmong culture. Home calls by social workers were completed during the time the minor was at home and the medications were checked, and it appeared as though the medications were being administered. The parents report no seizures. Lia was returned to the foster home on September 9, 1985 and was hospitalized later that day. Blood level checks revealed that no traces of any medications were found in the minor's blood. Dr. Goel, Lia's pediatrician at Emmanuel Medical Center, stated that the parents did not give Lia any medicine as the medication remains in the body for at least 10 days. The medication vials were returned empty by the parents. Janine Hilt wrote in her case log that when Lia returned to the Cordes, her chest was covered with coin-rubbing lesions. Phua and now qaug had obviously opted for traditional healing techniques and, as Janine noted, trashed the meds. 4 days after this home visit, Lia had 3 grand mal seizures and 6 petit mal seizures, after which her developmental deficits became far more pronounced. The petition stated that language delays were noted, her motor skills regressed, she would not eat or maintain eye contact, and she engaged in repeated head-banging behavior. Lia also became encopretic, fecally incontinent, engaged in a variety of self-abusive behaviors such as scratching and biting, could not sleep, was abusive to other children, and lost all ability to recognize safe situations. These regressions were all related to the parents' failure to administer the medication while Lia was in their care. These regressive behaviors have continued. Despite these setbacks, Janine Hilt was determined to try to continue to educate the Lees about Lia's medications so that they could regain custody. Before 12 months elapsed and they legally lost her for good, Janine spent dozens of hours working with Phua. Her task was aided by the fact that Lia's drug regimen was radically simplified in February of 1986. Dee had taken Lia to Valley Children's Hospital in Fresno for extensive neurological testing, where Terry Hutchison, a pediatric neurologist, reached a tentative diagnosis of Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, a rare form of epilepsy characterized by mental retardation and several forms of hard-to-control seizures. Dr. Hutchison decided that depakine, used alone, was the drug of choice. Neil and Peggy had considered depakine but had decided against it because it can cause liver failure. Once Lia was started on it, They wished they had prescribed it themselves. Pediatric Depakine is a liquid that tastes pleasantly of cherries, and it was far easier to administer than the complicated combinations of bitter ground-up pills Lia had previously been taking. Janine showed Phua how to use a plastic syringe to squirt the liquid into Lia's mouth, placing a piece of masking tape at the 8 cubic centimeters mark because Phua couldn't read numbers. Phua practiced with water until she was proficient, then graduated to Depakine. Janine felt that Phua was slowly learning to trust her and was making good progress. She did not develop a similarly intimate relationship with Now Cao, who continued to fear that Lia would never come home. He was wary of Janine, but he was not angry at her. His rage was reserved for Su Xiong, the interpreter, who had accompanied the CPS workers on the day of Lia's original detention. Su Xiong, a sophisticated, well-educated Hmong woman who had married an American, was not a popular figure in Merced's traditional Hmong community. Intermarriage is rare among the Hmong. According to Janine Hilt, culturally Su was pretty white, and she dressed real cute and was not at home having babies and sustaining the Hmong culture very well. So a lot of Hmong really saw her as selling out. Su Xiong once told Now Cao that she had informed CPS she did not think he should get his daughter back. In February of 1986, when Lia was at Valley Children's Hospital in Fresno, Now Cao says Su Xiong scolded him, and he became convinced that she was not accurately translating his statements to the doctors. The next day, back in Merced, Janine Hilt, Su Xiong, and a CPS supervisor came to the Lee house. Now Cao told me, I was outside and Su came inside and she called me and said, "Come in here. You come in here." At that time, I was ready to hit Su, and I got a baseball bat right there. My son-in-law was with me, and he grabbed me and told me not to do it. The supervisor and Janine, asked what's the matter, and my son-in-law translated what I was saying, and I said I did not like Su and I was going to beat Su to death right there that day. And then Su said that she had a lot of work to do, so she left. I told the supervisor, "This person is not good. Do not bring her here anymore. If you bring her here again, I'm going to get a gun and shoot her." When I called Su Xiong to ask her about this incident, at first she told me, in the most elegant English I had ever heard a Hmong speak, that she could not recall either the argument or the Lee family, which I found surprising, since I knew that before she married her American husband she had been married to Now Cao's nephew. Finally she said, "The family didn't appreciate my services, so I didn't want to be involved anymore." It is a credit to Janine Hilt's faith in the Lees that Su Xiong's near encounter with Now Cao's baseball bat did not permanently disqualify them from regaining custody of their daughter. The way Janine saw it, Now Cao had plenty of reasons to be angry, and as long as he didn't take out his anger in the form of medical noncompliance, it should not interfere with the reunification of his family. Starting on February 18, 1986, the Lees were permitted to keep Lia for a series of overnight visits under Janine's supervision. Blood tests showed they had administered adequate levels of Depakine. In the petition CPS filed at Lia's 12-month reunification hearing, Janine Hilt wrote, "As the Lees' skill increased, the visits were extended. The undersigned provided extensive supervision 3 times daily while the minor was in the home. Supervision decreased as the Lees demonstrated their willingness to maintain the medication regime. The undersigned has worked with the Lees on maintaining a daily schedule including proper diet, naps, and discipline. Mr. and Mrs. Lee are to be commended for their cooperation and positive efforts in working with the undersigned. In spite of their divergent cultural beliefs, as a result of their hard work, trust in the physician and neurologist Terry Hutchison, and the undersigned, we have made incredible headway in resolving Lia's serious medical problem." Lia returned home on April 30, 1986.